You have cited one reason why people might perceive that, because when your interim report came out, it seemed to have been focused on an individual, the SGF. Those who also say that, or who suggest that this might be a witch hunt, base it more on the report itself, which they say seems to be more focused on the contract awarded by Pine rather than more of the humanitarian aspect of this. They also talk about the fact that the Code of Conduct Bureau is in the office of the SGF, and you know that the Senate President is currently facing trial at the CCT, a trial he said is political. So how is it that this also could not be termed as political?
Well, as far as I'm concerned, before I was given the mandate to preside over the committee, I never even knew what Pine was all about. I don't even know who was the boss of Pine. But given that mandate, I was given not just a mandate, but a historic task. And that was as an activist before I became a senator. I was very much interested in what's happening in the northeastern part of Nigeria. So my report does not in any way has any political motive and inclination. And all that I was concerned about was that public officials in the position of authority use the opportunity of the crisis, the suffering, the hardship of people in the Northeast to enrich themselves. That is my report. And whether there was a political interpretation and there were issues between the Senate President and the SGF over Code of Conduct Bureau does not in any way has any bearing in my report. I had a duty to do a thorough job, and I did it, and I submitted my report. And the report has a clear compass, and that was Pine systematically was used to divert public funds to accounts of individuals, and contracts were set up to appease and please cronies, friends, and family members. That was just what happened.
Which was stated, I think, on page 30 of your report. You say contracts were awarded to companies belonging to top government officials, cronies, and close associates. But so far, only the SGF was mentioned. Which other top government officials were mentioned in that report?
If you go to the 47 pages of the report, the companies that were all involved were there. And he happened to be the boss of Pine. And the directors of the companies are all available at the Corporate Affairs Commission. So as far as we're concerned, if you give out a contract to a company and it has not done its job, so we indict that company. But in clear case where the SGF come into play is the very fact that there were transfers of funds from those companies to his accounts, which has his BVN number. And they were so innovative in their criminal process. You have a case whereby companies have all sorts of funny names, from names of universe, Mars, Venus, to names of even extinct animals. So these were companies that were used. So as far as I'm concerned, the SGF came into being because there were 13 bank accounts provided for us by the Central Bank of Nigeria, and which has BVN numbers all directed at him, and that is why he came in.
Senator, we have very few minutes to our first break, but then quickly, despite the damning findings that your committee was able to come up with in terms of how Pine has conducted its activities, what you recommended was a reorientation of Pine members. Why is that?
That was not what we recommended. The recommendation we made are very clear. And one was that people who are involved in exploitation and plunder and diversion of public funds should be disciplined. And secondly, what we said was that there were contractors that were given 100% payment and simply did 50%. And there were companies we tried to trace their addresses, they simply don't exist. So we all made recommendations on that. And we also recommended a complete overhaul on the way and manner in which the humanitarian services is conducted in this country. And we also made it very clear that the new body being set up by government should have a different focus, a different orientation.
A new body where? In Pine?
There is a new body, presidential committee, that succeeded the Pine, which I believe should be something different from what we have in Pine.
talking about your work with Pine, investigating Pine and the humanitarian crisis in the Northeast. But I know that as your background, and with your background as an activist, you're very concerned about the welfare of the masses and how, in some instances, corruption affects them. Would you say that the Senate did very well in terms of how it did its work with the confirmation hearing of Mr. Magu?
As far as I'm concerned, I believe that Magu has been doing a wonderful job as an anti-corruption crusader. He has been able to do a number of things that were unprecedented in the history of that commission, and that was very good. But as a parliament, I believe that there are people who, you can categorize the senators into three: those who are for Magu, those who are against Magu, and those who are simply don't care whoever it is. And as far as I'm concerned, Magu was not a victim of the Senate. He was a victim of the intractable civil war within the presidency, which now gave those who wants to bury him the opportunity simply. When he came to the Senate on that very day in March, I told him that he is here in March, and that was the Ides of March. And it was a historic day in the history of the Roman Senate when Caesar was killed. And I wish him well.
Was that
and I read the mood of the senators.
Was that a forewarning of what was to come?
Well, I read the mood of the senators, and I believe that it may not going to be easy for him.
By reading the mood, you already meant that the senators were going to reject him even before a hearing was done.
Well, from what happened in the first instance when he appeared, and then issues were raised, then there was a need for the presidency to do a thorough job. And then when he's going to be presented, all those issues could have been addressed. But I think what happened was simply he was represented for the second time, and what happened the first time simply repeated itself.
Do you stand for Magu? Are you one of those senators who stand for him?
For him in what sense?
You said there were categories of senators, those for him, those against him, and those in the middle somewhere.
Of course, I supported him, but unfortunately, there are people who say ayes and there are people who say nays. So those who say nays are the majority, and I am bound as a senator, irrespective of my own personal view, to go by the majority of what the senator says, and that's all.
Do you still support him?
Of course, he's doing a good job. Yes.